Hey guys, welcome back to the Blood Show podcast. Today I have a very special topic that I'm talking about. This is something that I just have been thinking about for a really long time. Coming out of my freshman year of college, just like the craziness that went on in this past year, struggle has been a big thing for me. And I know I'm not the only one that struggles. So I don't want this to sound like, woe is me, like my life is so hard, because that's not at all how I feel. I am very aware that everybody struggles in different ways and everybody struggles more or less in different seasons of their life. I would say that struggle has always been a part of my life, and I think it's always going to be a part of our lives. But I do think that there are seasons where we struggle more in different areas of our lives. For example, some people struggle financially for a really long time. Some people struggle physically for a really long time. Some people are struggling spiritually. Like, there are many different areas of our lives that we can struggle, that we do struggle in and through and with. And so I just want to talk a little bit about that and what that's looked like in my own life. So, the first ever episode that I did on this podcast, I talked a lot about my anxiety and how fear has always had a big hold on my life. It has shaped me in a lot of ways. And if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen. You'll hear a lot about my testimony and my story, but in that I explained how the Lord really came into my life and helped me overcome a lot of the anxiety that I struggled with for a really long time. It definitely impacted the way that I lived my life. And that was hard. I didn't like it. I knew something had to change. Through a lot of prayer, through a lot of counsel and help that I sought out, I was able to overcome a lot of that anxiety. And in the moment, or at least during that time of my life, senior year was a really big shift for me. And during that time, I really felt like I had overcome anxiety in a lot of ways, almost to the point where I thought that maybe like I wouldn't struggle with it ever again. And I think that sometimes that is true for people. Sometimes people overcome areas that they're struggling in, things that they're struggling with, and the Lord provides full healing over that. And I truly believe that that is possible, that God is 100% capable of doing that. But what I want to talk about today is that that's not what it looked like for me. Just to provide a little bit of context for people, I have always been super socially anxious. I deeply cared about what people thought of me. And even though I don't struggle with it quite like I used to, I still struggle with it tremendously. And I guess what was hard for me was going into college and feeling like I was on top of the world because I had overcome a lot of the things that I never thought I would have overcome. But I definitely still deeply cared about what people thought of me. And it was a big wake-up call when I got into college and realized how many people-pleasing tendencies I still struggle with, I still have, and how they affected me during my freshman year. People-pleasing affects your friendships, your job, your hobbies, your passions. Like, when you have an intense desire and need to please the people around you, it's going to affect your life in major ways. And it definitely affected mine. And I think it can get in the way of being yourself, being who you truly are, being true to yourself, your wants and needs, your desires, your likes and your dislikes. And so that was definitely something that I struggled with during my freshman year. And I didn't really have the time or the capacity to realize it in the moment. I've done a lot of reflecting since being home for the summer, since having a lot of extra time on my hands. And the more I look back on the year and the more I think about things that happened, the more that I realize, like, oh my gosh, I was struggling. Like, I was having a hard time with things that I didn't necessarily think I was gonna struggle with anymore. Towards the end of it, I honestly thought that most of my struggles were because of things that were going on during the year. And so my mindset was like, oh, once I get home, once I get out of school, like, I'm not gonna be struggling anymore. Like, I'm gonna be good, I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna have a relaxing summer. Like, everything is gonna pan out just fine. And then I got home and I had a lot to process through. And that's a whole thing in and of itself. But I came home and my problems did not go away. It wasn't as stress-free as I thought it was going to be. And believe it or not, I got home and I was still struggling. Still am struggling spiritually with trusting God, trusting that He has my best interest at heart. That has always been really hard for me. Ever since giving my life to the Lord, I am just I don't know, I'm very independent. I think that I can take care of myself. I can handle my things. I don't need anybody else to help me. I have a really hard time with asking people for help. I like to do it all on my own. And when you give your life to the Lord, when you make Him Lord over your life, you're giving up that independence because you're saying, I am incapable of knowing what's best for myself because my heart is deceitful. My flesh doesn't know what's best for me. And so you're giving up that independence and you're saying, Lord, this is yours. I want you to have it. I trust you with it because you know what's best for my life. So that's just one of the examples that I have, just with a lot of anxiety coming back up because my life is changing. I think the older I get, the more I realize that life is not as cookie cutter as I guess I thought it was going to be. I don't know, growing up I just had this idea that, like, you know, I was going to graduate high school and then go to college, and then I was going to go to college, get a degree, and then I was going to get a big girl job, and then, you know, I was going to find a husband and get married and then have a family. And the older I get, the more I realize that that's just not how life works. There's so much more that goes into that. And I think the more I give up control over the things going on in my life, the scarier it gets because I no longer have the plans that once made me feel so safe and secure. I'm sure I've talked about this on previous episodes, but since sophomore, junior year of high school, I knew I was going to major in psychology. I knew I was going to do something either in the counseling world or with child development. I was like set on it. I knew I was going to dance. I knew, like, I had all of these plans and I was so sure that it was going to work out just the way that I imagined it would. And get to freshman year of college, get through my first semester, I realize psychology is not what I want to do. I don't want to be in school for that long. I don't want to go that route. Then I'm left with this decision to change my major to something else. Come to find out, I don't know what else I want to do because I've been so set on psychology for so long. I feel like the more I surrender things to the Lord, the scarier it gets, because I no longer have that security that makes me feel so secure and safe. And it's so hard. I just feel like I've struggled this past year more than any year before. And obviously, I think a lot of it is just growing up, becoming an adult, realizing that high school really was a lot easier than it felt like it was in the moment while I was in high school. Becoming an adult also has positives. And I was talking to one of my friends about this the other day, but I truly believe that life is what you make it. Sometimes you'll try something and you realize it's not for you. But even in doing something that you're not necessarily enjoying, or doing something that you know you're not going to continue to do because it's not fun, it's not bringing you joy, it's not what you feel like you're called to do, even when you're stuck in it, kind of waiting for it to be over, there are ways to make the most of it. And I truly believe that it all has to do with perspective, and always knowing that whatever life throws at you, whatever you go through, like, I think that you can always learn something from it. There are always positives, even in the most negative situations and even in the hardest circumstances. While I've been home, while I've had a lot of time to think and reflect, I've just constantly been in a state of asking God, like, why do I not know what's going to happen next year? Why is nothing going the way that I thought it would? I kept asking God, like, why am I struggling? I feel like I shouldn't be struggling, because life is fairly good right now. I don't really, like, I should be fine, right? As I was thinking about struggle and why people struggle, this thing came to my mind, and it was just this phrase: struggle is not defeat. And I was like, now what does that mean? And the more I kind of prayed about it, the more I really feel like the Lord is trying to show me that struggle is okay. But, like, I think struggle is a sign of our brokenness, our inability to do things on our own. And in the same sense, I think that it's a reminder that everything in this life is temporary. I'm a firm believer that everything that happens on this side of heaven is going to be a struggle. It's going to be a fight. It's going to be hard, even more so for followers of Jesus. Like, our college pastor was talking about this last night in his sermon. And, he was just talking about how the Christian life is not easy. In fact, it's going to be really hard, especially because you have a target on your back. Like, Satan's goal is to steal, kill, and destroy. He wants you to be separated from God. He wants you to fall into the ways of the world. He wants you to be discontent. He wants you to be unhappy. He doesn't care about the people that are already, living worldly lives. He doesn't care about them. He already has them wrapped around his finger. I just think that my perspective on struggling is being reshaped, because I'm no longer looking at it as such a negative thing. Because on the other end of struggle is either defeat or victory. And the cool thing about following Jesus is that Jesus is victorious. He's already won the battle. He defeated sin. Jesus overcame the world. Jesus provided a way for us to live with God for eternity. That's victory, because everything that happens in this life is gone when you die. Like, we're all gonna die one day. You're either gonna die and spend eternity with God, your Savior who loves you and who wants to spend eternity with you, or you're gonna spend eternity separated from Him. And suddenly, everything on this earth will not matter. Obviously, we're still gonna be concerned about the things of this life because we're humans and this life does matter. What you do on earth matters. The way that you live your life matters. God doesn't need us, but He chooses to use us. And that's an honor. Like, that is a great thing. That is something that I'm so thankful for because I get to be a part of what God is doing. My encouragement to you is to not despise the struggle. We're all struggling, but my prayer for you is that struggle would push you to pursue the Lord even more. Even when it's hard, even when you don't want to, even when there's a million other ways that you could cope with the thing that you're struggling with. My hope and my prayer for you is that you would press into the Lord through that struggle, through that fight, through the times of testing and the times where the circumstances that you're in are just, they feel completely unbearable. Those are the kinds of seasons and the kind of things that produce character in you. They produce perseverance. And through those things, you're able to bear fruit. You're able to know God more. We live to know Jesus and to make Him known. And I think a big part of that is struggling. It's necessary to our faith, to life. I have learned so much in the things that I've struggled with, in the seasons that I've struggled. I think there's a lot of good that can come from struggling, especially because we serve a good God. You know, we serve a redeeming God. We serve a victorious God, and He's fighting for you. He loves you. He does have your best interest at heart, and He just wants a relationship with you. He wants to walk through life with you. He wants to be there for you, and I'm right there with you. Like, it's so hard, and I want you to know that it should be hard. Just because you might see people on social media, Christian influencers, who look like they have it all together, who look like they're not struggling. Everybody's struggling in one way or another. So don't lose sight of the hope that we have in Jesus. Our job is to trust Him, even when it's hard, and trust that we have everything that we need. I hope that today's episode encouraged you in some way. I know that the more that I've pressed into the Lord, the more that I've pressed into prayer and His Word, the more peace I've felt about the things that I'm struggling with right now, and the more I've seen my perspective shift. And so, go to the Lord with your struggles, because He's the only one that's going to be able to provide you with the peace that you're looking for, the peace and the hope that you're looking for. Thank you guys so much for listening. This episode is the last episode of this season, which is, it's just so cool to see how to see what the Lord did through this podcast, to see what he did in my own life and the lives that he's been able to touch through this podcast is just so cool. And I am going to continue to do this podcast until I feel like the Lord tells me to stop. I'm going to be taking a little break for a while, but I can't wait to come back, and I just can't wait to see all that the Lord's going to do. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and I can't wait to see you guys on the next season of the podcast.